am so excited about today's podcast. I feel like the topic applies to everyone. Parenting adult children is hard.
Because if you're doing it or you're going to be doing it, so you need to know about it.
Yes. So tell us about our guest
All
today.
right. His name is Paul Church, and he goes to my church, and that's how I know him. And he's got adult children and some children he's still actively parenting. So he's got a nice broad view of what life is like on both sides of that. And he's just very well versed and easy to talk to. So I thought he would be lovely to invite to just talk about what his experience has been and what advice he might have. And I can't wait for him to come on.
I know. Let's do it.
Paul, I'm so glad you were able and willing to come and talk with us today. It's so fun to have a male here. We should do it more often. But we know we invited your wife as well. She couldn't make it. It's always nice to have both perspectives when it comes to parenting. But I know you're going to come with all the stuff. So, but why don't we start with you telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here. So, yeah, Paul Church. Definitely missing the best part of this with my wife not being able to be. She's a school teacher, so she can't make it during this time. But definitely the better part. So, but we did talk about this ahead of time. So I have some Vicky wisdom to bring
nice,
you.
nice.
So, yeah, but anyways, though. Man, we've been, we were in full-time ministry for many years and loved it, absolutely loved it. I was telling you ahead of time, it's kind of this long, crazy, glorious story, but good story of why we're not doing that now. Ministry is very unconventional, non-traditional, and amazing, and we love that and stuff, but 4 kids. I guess you want to hear about that part.
Yes.
4 kids. 26 years old is our oldest, married. Our daughter, they have a little girl, our first grandchild, and there's one on the way. So we're excited about that. We have a son. He's going to be 24 in just a couple of weeks, and he's doing amazing. He's not married, but pretty much has found the one, and we couldn't be happier. So 21-year-old who's in college. He's a senior at School of Mines. And then a 17-year-old. She just turned 17-year-old. She's a junior in high school. And so we kind of, we got a little ways to go before empty nest, but, we feel mostly that way, so.
But you got one foot in the grandparent area and one foot on still actively parenting is what we call it in our house.
Yeah.
We're very similar, except I only have 3. So I have the 16, and then the 21, and then the 24.
Yeah.
So we joke around in our house that, we're only legally required to provide food for one. So we always say, our one...
That's the line, if you're providing food or not.
We do the same thing, yeah.
Well, it started with our exchange student, and it was part of the training. Like, we had to legally... provide food. We're like, who's not doing this?
Right.
What is going on? So anyway, it became a family joke, but it's fun to be like, you're actively parenting one, and then what would you call what you're doing with the others? Because that's kind of where we're talking about when you're, parenting adults. How is it different than actively parenting a child?
It's way different. It is. So when a child is little, you do everything for them, right? Yeah, they kind of need you in order to live, and so they will literally stop breathing. Their heart will stop if you're not involved, right? And so when as they get older, they're more able to take care of themselves and things. And by the time they're adults, your role changes from that caregiver to consultant, I think, And even then, it's a almost based on invitation, kind of, sort of, And so we wonder. We enjoy a wonderful relationship. I was telling you just a little bit ago that the whole family was over at the house for dinner last night and stuff, and we laughed. We had a great time, and so we enjoy that great relationship with all of them. But it just looks a lot different because in the same room as our 17-year-old that has a lot of freedom, but yet. We're parenting her a lot differently than we are our older ones that, do their own thing. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Walk us through a little bit what that looks like, because I'm a control freak. We also talked about that earlier. Like, how do you begin changing from the one that you're parenting to consulting? What does that look like? How do you get there?
Yeah. Well, it was an 18-year process. Society has picked this random number 18 that makes you an adult, right? But we've just kind of said, okay, because it kind of coincides with graduating from high school and stuff like that, kind of, sort of. And so, and we would talk about this with our kids growing up, and this whole idea of just an 18-year process of releasing control. Releasing control, right?
Keyword.
Yeah, and giving them more decision-making power, over the course of time. It's tough to do that, but like I said, early in life, you're making every decision for them, and then, at some point, they're asking you, if we could do something for them, and you realize, that's totally something you can do for yourself. Which, what do you think is best? And so you're there. They're making their decisions, their own decisions, and I think it's important for them to do that while they still have the covering of home. Driver's ed is having a learner's permit is kind of a snapshot of this. Our big goal was, I hope this applies. I hope this comes back around to make the point, but we're like, as soon as you're able to, you're going to get your learner's permit, and of course our kids were always eager, because it's like, we want you to be driving, which is scary, but we want you to be driving as much as you can with as much of our covering as you can have for the longest that you can have, so that by the time you're on your own, you're driving everywhere, and we're not worried about, oh my gosh, are they going to, get into a wreck because they're horrible drivers. And it's the same thing with life decisions. I think it's this gradual process over the course of, say, 18 years, or by the time they graduate high school, because they might go off to college somewhere, going to make all kinds of crazy decisions, and know that, they've had practice.
I think it's interesting. You said that it's like an 18-year conversation of the eventual letting go.
It is a conversation.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because I feel like it's helpful for me too to have that conversation.
Yes,
Like, it's not only preparing them for that, but preparing ourselves for that, because it's it's hard to. I wouldn't say I'm a control freak or anything like that, but it's more. The responsibility, you feel the responsibility of the children, and then letting them feel their own responsibility, and that is kind of scary sometimes.
sure.
So yeah, I like that it's a long conversation you're having.
Right.
Yeah. And how do you feel like that dynamic works, again, when you are letting one child become independent and doing their own, and the other is still within your covering?
Right.
What have you found to be helpful with when conflict happens? Like, well, he gets to, or she gets to.
Well, you've heard that, right? You didn't do that with the others, and stuff. And so, well, can I just give a disclaimer? And we mentioned this last night, just when we're hanging out, having dinner with the whole family, that we parent our youngest way different than we parented our oldest.
Because we're different people.
We're different people. We've learned a lot,
Yeah.
We've kind of mellowed out just a little bit, and so they know that, they see that, and they understand. They get it, even if there's still a little bit of a about that, But and it's that trying to communicate, because in the teenage brain, it still doesn't make sense sometimes. Of, you're two different people. Our oldest and our number one, the firstborn and the secondborn. Vastly different. Well, they're all vastly different, but in particular them. And he would say, well, Maddie got to do this, or something. Or Maddie might say, well, I never got to do that. And so it's like, well, you're two different people, And we'll talk about the fact that we've grown and we've learned, but we have to parent each kid based on that kid, and so that opens up another conversation,
Yes.
Well, what about me then makes you feel like I can't handle this?
Yes.
But again, that's such a healthy conversation in a good way.
In a good way.
Yeah.
And you try to keep it in a good way. A lot of times those conversations don't start in a good way.
Yeah.
But then it's, bringing it around to something good and positive,
Yeah.
is
And
the
allowing
goal.
them to be okay that they are different than their siblings. Like, that is a positive thing. I think sometimes they can look at that as a negative thing, but it's a positive thing.
It's something to celebrate.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
And so we will. And that sometimes has opened up a door for that conversation of, okay, maybe this is a good time for you to make your own decision about this, and stuff. So, I mean, I think the key aspect is for mom and dad to have a plan, but also to share that plan with the children. Sometimes we do our own thing and we know what we're doing, and they're just in the dark. And as they get older, that being in the dark doesn't feel right. They're trying to spread their, it's natural. They will push back sometimes on a lot of things, but understanding that's normal. They're trying to spread their wings here. You know, it's not because they hate you. It's just they're supposed to want to leave home at some point. You know, that's hard for us, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, but those opportunities just, you know, they open up the conversation.
Yeah.
So.
Well, talking about them coming to a point where they're like, okay, maybe this is a time for you to make your own decision on that, leads to a question that parents always have or will run into, and that is what to do when they make the wrong choice.
Oh,
and of course, first of all, wrong is relative. Wrong in your opinion or an actual
good point,
full-on wrong choice, because that's the other thing. Like sometimes we have to ask ourselves, is it really a wrong choice or just not what you would have done?
Right.
Is it really a sin, or is it just immaturity, or is it really like that was a bad choice and what do you do now? So what have been some of your experiences with that?
Oh,
and
plenty.
how to navigate it, you know?
Lots.
Oh yeah. But what have been some examples, just so we can all
for sure
relate?
Well, one, it goes back to remembering, you know, my bad choices, my wrong choices, or choices that were how I was different. My dad in particular, it's taken me some time to just kind of remember. It seemed like that whatever my dad would say, I would just pick the opposite, you know? And it's like, why did I do that? You know, and I think it was me trying to find my own way, that kind of thing, you know? My dad and I, you know, we enjoyed a great relationship, but I know it was really frustrating for him, you know? And so just kind of remembering those kind of things. But, you know, when they make a decision, we give them the power, give them the freedom, and empower them to make a decision. You know, hopefully, the hope is that enough has gone into that they will be able to make the right processes and make a good decision. Even if that's not what we would have done, is it a good decision, you know? And so, and our ability to let go of that, you know, we want to teach consequences to our kids. We don't like it when our kids experience consequences, you know, unless we're the ones giving it, right? You know, because it's planned and controlled.
Yes.
But when they experience life consequences, we have this desire to just
swoop in,
helicopter, right? Yeah. And so letting them feel that, but part of this whole conversation, part of this process and empowering them to make a decision is also talking about consequences. That, you know, you're not always going to, and knowing that you're not always going to make good decisions. You know, sometimes you're going to make a decision and realize, man, I shouldn't have done that. But, and so when they've done what they thought was the right thing, and they're experiencing negative consequence, that heartbreak that we feel as parents just wants us to come in and just make it all better, kiss it better, right? But we are more, I think, instead of just, and it just all depends, but instead of just an automatic bailout, I think just presence, you know, that, man, this did not work out the way you wanted it to, you know, and there's been several of those. And then it's just, I mean, I'm just a big talker, you know, so I talk a lot, you know, my whole life I've just talked. And so it's just talking through that. And so what could you have done better? Those kinds of things. Now, when it comes to, that's just not what we have done. That's the frustrating part sometimes. And you want to, you know, from guide to consultant are two different things. You know, at some point it's a guide to say, here, do this. Is our instruction to them, you know, where it's, and this is all part of the process of helping them mature. You know, we'll guide them, and I like to fly fish, and so we follow a guide, and the guide says, here, you know, tie this on, and cast there. So that's what we do, right? But and we do that as parents at some point. But those times where we transition to a consultant, where it's like, you know, here's a way to think about that, you know, instead of do it this way, do it just, you know. And so when they, in their own thought processes, come up with something that's different, it's like, I don't know how they got there, but they got there let's see what happens. And, most of the time it works out okay.
Yeah.
I
I love that we're talking about this. My question is, so in this case, we're kind of talking about kids who might be seeking your advice and you get the
Right.
opportunity to speak into it.
Right.
Walk us through what that's like when they have something going on, they're not asking for help or advice, but you feel it inside. It's bubbling up.
Yep.
How do you walk through that with
Yeah.
grown adults? Because they're not kids. We're not parenting anymore. We're either guiding or consulting. So
Right.
what does that look like when they're not asking?
Well, and becoming grandparents has introduced a whole new wave of this.
Can only imagine.
Because we did things a lot different. Of course, I remember my parents saying the same thing. But they're not seeking advice. And so honestly, the big challenge is don't give it. My wife and I will have this conversation. we just there's been a few things here and there where it's like, we're not passive aggressive people, but sometimes it feels like what if we just kind of put a little passive aggressive little hint in there? And we're like, okay, we're not going to do that. But sometimes we'll just ask questions, so what happens if, and just kind of, and sometimes that's gone well, sometimes it hasn't, but it's this, if they're not seeking advice, unless we see some big waterfall that they are, getting ready to go over the edge of, we've raised them, we've done the best we could, and we're confident. We trust them. We're confident in their abilities. They've done well so far. They're not asking for the advice, so let's see what happens. Let's let them go.
And I think that's the difference. I like your word of consultant, because I've always heard it as coaching, like you go from parenting to coaching, but coaching still shows like an element of authority over someone.
Oh, that's a good point.
And a consultant, it literally is, people usually pay you to give them advice. So they're coming to you.
Right.
And if they don't come to you, they don't want to hear it. So
Right.
I really appreciate that verbiage.
Yeah.
And I can see how I can appreciate. And I've been at a point in my life where, you parent out of fear, because you're just like, you're afraid that they're going to do something bad's going to happen to them, or they're going to do something wrong, and then the consequences. And I can see how that can translate into even consulting, where you're like, well, I have to tell them, because if I don't tell them what I know, how are they? Well, they're going to learn like you did. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I think if you
Right.
let go of the fear and go into the confidence of, look, we raised them the best we could. It's reminding yourself that they're in God's hands, and He loves
Absolutely.
them even more than you are literally capable of.
Absolutely.
And so having that confidence in God's sovereignty, that He actually works through mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And He works
For
through
sure.
our failures. You got to be like, hey, you did it for me? So he can do it
We
for
all
them.
learned that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I know I did, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think is that I'm not living vicariously through my kids. And
Amen.
so I can let go of their outcomes. I want the best for them, right? And I want them to succeed.
And
I want them to
sometimes
do
the best
better than
is
we've
them
done.
making a mistake.
Right. And
'Cause
that's
they learn.
That's so
how we
hard.
learned.
It's true, though.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
it
how
is.
we learned.
Yeah.
And that's how they learned. But if there's this big looming, like, horrible thing that we can see clearly that's about to happen, then we feel like that we do have the ability with our kids, and even this unspoken permission to say, hey, think about this, this is what our fear is that could happen as a result of this. What do you think? And still, they're making their own decision, but it's this, so we have that ability to give advice. We have that unsolicited advice,
Because you built the relationship.
because you build a relationship. See, I think that's the key. Our goal has been, we want an ongoing, amazing relationship with our kids, well into adulthood, for the rest of our lives. That's what we want. And if we're putting our finger on everything and just controlling and say, do this and that, and not letting them spread their wings, do their own, make their decisions, then, well, that's going to hurt. We feel like that would hurt that relationship,
I love that you're sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
that you're talking just about relationship. Are there things that you do other than just asking good questions that build that bridge? Are there things you purposely do with your older kids specifically to try and build that bridge?
You know, we keep lines of communication open. You know, my wife has her specific ways that she connects with each kid, and I do, and it's what we've had since they were little, and so we still kind of connect in that way, you know, kind of thing, and it all kind of revolves around just keeping lines of communication open and things. You know, try to, you know, when you love somebody, you want to try to do some thoughtful things here and there and stuff like that. So we're blessed that they all live close. And so the farthest one lives 25 minutes away. So it's like, we can handle that. You know, her husband, he's amazing. We love him. And he's from Chicago. They could have just as easily moved there. So we're so glad that they're here. But, and we just get to see them. And it's just that intentional communication points. And what we're finding now is our daughter, oldest, you know, she's the one that's reaching out to us, you know, and it's just for the purpose of connecting. And sometimes there's, hey, I need help, or I need advice or on something like that. There's not a lot of that, honestly, because, she's got a good head and she does pretty well. But if there's a big decision, though, she'll at least let us know that it's there, and she'll kind of give us, the lowdown on what's happening. But she's reaching out to us, and we're just so blessed because we know we don't take it for granted. We don't feel like that this is happening because we did it all right, because we're the first to say we made so many mistakes, we could still make some big mistakes, and we have with our grown kids, we've overstepped some boundaries, I believe, and they let us know it, and we listen.
To me, that's a sign of a healthy relationship, though, that they feel comfortable telling you.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah, but growing up, we made so many mistakes. Some of them I thought were big mistakes. My wife and I both will look back, and it's not without some regret.
Yeah.
But yet somehow through all of that, we have this amazing relationship with our kids. I think that's the big fear parents have, especially if they don't yet have adult kids. And I know I'm probably rambling off topic, maybe from your question, but I think that's a big fear. A lot of parents who might have all their kids still in the home, they know all of the mistakes they're making, and they're just so afraid that my kids aren't going to want to have anything to do with me when they're grown up, And we had the same fear, because we made more than our fair share of mistakes. But I don't know. I think just presence, love, communication, I'm sorries and apologies are massive right there, and lessons learned along the way. Yeah. And I don't know. It just
I love
keeps things
you
alive.
saying that you respect your adult children's boundaries, because I think that's so important. That shows the mutual respect, and that it has shifted from, parenting to consulting.
Yeah.
It's so funny as you're talking. I know both of you are in the same boat as me. That you heard when your kids were young about the visual of the jar and the marbles and the rocks and all that. And you only have so many summers and so many Christmases and the amount of pressure that put on me personally. I don't know how it affected you guys. I did think it's healthy and maybe be intentional about my parenting, but it also put this layer of fear, like this is all the time I have.
Right.
And when they're gone, I'm done, and it wasn't until my oldest, was going off to college, and I was like, she was preparing, and I was just like, I felt like I was like cramming for an exam or something. And finally she's like, I'm not like dying or going to another country. Like, I'm still going to be in your life. I don't know what you're doing here.
Still call me tomorrow.
I was like, I just feel like, and she's like,
you're gone.
And so I think the point is to shift our brains into controlling their lives to being a part of their lives, because that was such a lie. I mean, the goal is to really have, yes, we have this control when they're young, but our goal should be long-lasting engagement and influence.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you have to build a relationship first.
Yeah.
And it starts young.
Right.
It starts very
And when
young.
you do it and it goes well, it is actually such a joy.
Amen.
I mean, there are definitely hard moments for
Right.
sure, but I am finding it to be such a joy
Yes,
as they get
exactly.
older, to spend time and have really in-depth conversations with them.
Right.
But you start
Yeah.
to see him as more of a human and
Yeah.
an individual separate from you, you know, and
Yeah.
I also really appreciate you talking about, I think more parents need to hear that. We all make mistakes. Like you will make mistakes, but that's the funny thing. If we look at that and see how God worked through our mistakes for his glory, we have to just trust his redemptive power. Then we can have confidence when our children are making mistakes. We're like, well, I can't wait to see how God redeems that, you know,
Right.
and how he works in your life.
Yeah. What we found is those mistakes just made it real, made it authentic,
Yes.
you know, because we want to give the, you know, well, maybe, you know, some might have this temptation to present as, you know, do as I do, you know, because we got to be that example.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I gave up. I gave up on that a long time ago. But we want to present ourselves as the example for our kids. There's a lot of pressure, I think, sometimes to do that, and of course, we want to be a good example, and so we want to do the right thing. We want to, you know, model a relationship with Christ, and all of these kinds of things for sure. Knowing that we don't do it well, but I think when they see that we don't do it perfect, I think it takes the pressure off of them as well, and that love still exists whenever we don't. Not just in the home, but with Jesus, with God. Whenever we make mistakes, and we just, you know, we learn from it, and we get up and keep moving.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I have a hard question.
Uh-oh.
I mean, we have a couple of them, but just with the cost of living going up so much,
Oh, man.
there
Yeah.
are a lot more adult children staying home longer. How do you think that's impacting parenting? Have you experienced that? How are you seeing that? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about that?
You know, we haven't really experienced that so much. I mean, our college student, you know, he's 21, going to be 22 in a few months, but he's a senior. We live so close to the school, it just makes financial sense for him to, you know, it kind of lends in there. But he's a good example, I think, because, you know, we finished our basement, and that was Boyland, you know, so that's theirs. And so he still lives there. And, but he's, you know, he's 21, almost 22. He's building his own life. He's making his own decisions. And how do you know, when you have a kid living at home, making their own decisions, what does that look like? Because honestly, it feels like that it's me and my wife and our youngest daughter, our 17-year-old. That's who I'm responsible for now, you know? And so
That's
yes,
who you're actively parenting.
right. He doesn't get with us, you know, hey, can I go out, you know, or anything like that. He's, you know, these days we have Life 360. We just look up where he is,
Yeah.
you know, which is cool that they all have elected to stay on Life 360, which
Yes.
I'm totally shocked at.
Same.
But, right. But
My daughter uses it more on me than I do on her.
my
all the
oldest,
time.
she's the one, she sits on there all day. Yeah.
She's like,
and she's like,
I'll go somewhere. She's like, what are you doing over there? I'm like, what are you doing looking? What is
right.
wrong with you?
Yeah. Our youngest, she just sees if we're at a restaurant. She's like, could you get me a
Yeah, exactly. Bring this home from
right. But but our 21-year-old, he's there. You know, he doesn't need to ask permission for anything. He
Yeah,
doesn't
but do
need
you
to,
feel like it's because you have built such a good relationship and you have demonstrated the respective boundaries that he's not pushing the limits with
Right.
you? I feel like that's the case because
you know,
I
I
hear
guess
a
that's
lot
a
of
good point.
stories of parents. They're like, I have my adult child living at home, and they're like bringing friends over, staying up late, making noise, not respecting these house rules. And first question is, are they understood? Does he understand those are the house rules? Have you talked about it?
Yeah,
But
you
then
know-
the other is, if you've done what you did, build a good relationship, it's probably different.
I think it's different because he in particular is the one that he loves to have the deep conversations, you know. But, you know, our house is fairly chaotic anyway, you know, because, you know, 4 kids and then all of their friends. And there's a lot of people at our house at any given moment of the day anyway. Yeah. So, you know, some call it crazy. We call it family is the old saying, right?
Yes.
So, but, so he'll have people. He'll usually tell us, "Hey, I'm having some guys over," and they're pretty cool about realizing that we're old and go to bed early. So, but so they do pretty good on that. But you know, we don't get bent out of shape if they, you know, get a little loud or stuff, but they normally don't. But so if he has people over, he'll say, hey, I'm going to have some people over, and it's like, yeah, no worries. It's never a problem. We've always been that way with things. When it comes to friends over, we want to be the place where they bring the friends, But yeah, what happens though when, they're downstairs smoking weed or whatever it is that they're doing. It's like, and there's like, we don't want this, in our home, kind of thing. And I think that becomes a different conversation, where we're not afraid to have that conversation. We've not had to have the conversation, but at the same time, totally not afraid to have it if we needed to, where it's like, look, this is our place, you know how we feel about this, that I really wish you didn't do that, kind of would be the conversation. And you already know why, because we've
talked about it.
We've talked about it, for years, these types of things, and we're sad. But when it comes to, living here and staying here, we're not going to allow that. In our house. So no matter who it is, it's not because it's you, is no matter who it is, it's not going to be in our house. And so if you're going to do it, you're going to have to find some other place, but understand that hurts and makes us sad, breaks our hearts that you're making that decision. And in the end, if they continue, because our kids, some of them, there's been some times where they've made decisions that even, we don't share the same values on that, It wasn't weed, but it was other things where it's like, we don't share those values with you. They know how we feel. And it's like, we might have that conversation of, that's not exactly how you were raised and stuff. But at the same time, we have this understanding that, we can't control them, but yet we still trust them. And so it's if you're going to do that, you're not going to do it here is one thing. And they just understand that, we don't feel the same way. We're not going to control that part of their lives. And we trust God that, he's doing a deeper work than we ever could.
Yeah. So much about what we're talking about is based on having a healthy, good relationship with your kids. And I think it's fair to say not everyone has that.
Sure.
So from your pastor heart, what would you say to parents who are like, but I don't have that relationship or that respect, mutual respect? Yeah. What would you say to a parent that's where they are?
Well, I would say, honestly, for a long time, we've felt that same way. I'm not here doing this podcast because, hey, I've done it all well, I should be making a lot of money off a book. It's not like that. So, because we have felt that same way, in particular with one of the children, right? And so there's always one.
There's
always one.
God stretches us.
But we have a great relationship, we really genuinely do. And I think all the way through we did, but there were times where it's like, we were just heartsick because feeling that relationship might be going away, And so, but we have had those times where it felt like, we're messing this up so bad, And so, I don't know. I really think there's the authenticity piece is huge. There's a lot of, and I can't say this is not in every case. It's not in every case of, when we feel like we have a bad relationship. Through my years of pastoring, there was a lot of counseling that I did with parents who just, their kids had to do right. They had to do the right thing, and, my 8-year-old, is making terrible decisions. And it's like, oh my gosh, yes, they are, they're 8, and stuff, and they're going to learn and all these kind of things. And then on the flip side, and so there's that pressure of they've got to be doing it right, and they're not. And so I have to control that. And then there's on the other part is I have to be that perfect example, knowing full well that I'm not. And what we have as a result is just a lot of, inauthenticity. We're not being genuine with them. We're not allowing them, to be genuine either. They just get this complex of I can't do anything right. I can't make my parents proud or whatever it is, And so through the failures, through the victories, when we're doing well, when we're not doing well, when it comes to the kids or even with us, just owning that, I think is huge. That's a big lesson we learned, because for the longest time, it's like we feel like that, of course this never happens, but if I slip up and say something, say a word that I shouldn't be saying around my kids or at all, maybe it's this, oh my gosh, I've ruined them, And it's like, no, you haven't, what you've shown them is something real and authentic about yourself, even if it's things that, man, it's like, I really need to do better in this area of my life. And so, I don't know, I think there's just owning that we don't have it together. None of us do here. And just talking about that, if it's all arguments about this and about that, those are just symptoms, right? Yep. Everything that we argue about with our kids are just symptoms. And so there's a deeper issue there, and that's okay, this relationship is not where it's supposed to be. We start focusing on that and talk about that. The kids, whether they can even put the thought process together to realize that's their biggest desire or not. Because a lot of times maybe they can't. Maybe they can't come down to that what I really want is a good relationship with my mom and dad. That's what they want. And so if we as the grown-ups can just kind of say, the real problem here is, not all these symptoms. It's, this relationship isn't really none of us are happy with this. And we just talk about that. And we use the words, I'm sorry, as parents. They're going to start saying that too, I think it's just a natural thing, But as parents, we got to let go of this idea of, but I want them to see, they're wrong. And I need them to say, I'm sorry because this and that. Because then we're just focusing on the symptoms again, and we're not focusing on a relationship.
And then we're not getting what we even really desire out of the situation. Do we really want them to see you're right or wrong, or is that really the goal, or are you really trying to build a relationship and want the well-being of the child? It's I would say probably the number one thing if they don't have a healthy relationship with their child would be to take themselves to counseling and figure out what's wrong. What do I need to do? What part do I play in this scenario? And then focus on, yes, you have to have boundaries, to be healthy yes, but you also need, not transactional love, make sure it's clear that the children have their unconditional love. And then they're a little more open to you saying, I need you to respect this boundary for me, Right. But I think that's probably the hardest thing is realizing that we are human and it's okay to be human, but also to try to make sure we're the best version of ourselves in not perfection and behavior, but in health, emotional health,
right. And what are my expectations here? What expectations are not being met that I'm really wanting them to meet for me?
Yes.
And
that's so true.
And it's just,
And processing not when you're in the heat of the moment.
Right.
Right? Because everything we're talking about, you can't process any of this when you're in the middle of fighting about whatever it is that the symptom is.
Yeah.
Right? It's to go away and prepare your own heart to and then work through it.
And they might be real issues. I mean, we call them symptoms, but somebody listening might say, but it's a big deal,
Yeah.
And okay, it's a big symptom, and so of some holes in this relationship that we want to, and sometimes an argument doesn't mean there's holes in a relationship, by any stretch, by any means. It's just that I think sometimes I know how it can be, and it's just one argument after another, and then we go into our next interaction with this expectation that it's not going to be good,
right?
On both sides.
Yeah.
The kids feel that way about parents. And so, when it says fathers don't exasperate your children, in the New Testament, moms and dads, right? I think we can, unisex that thing. And so, this exasperation piece, boy, we're good at doing that.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
the command is to love and lead, and leadership looks different over time. But we, and the boundaries piece, I think, is huge. And even it's okay, letting boundaries form while they're still at home, and you can still be a good, godly parent. Part of my thing, we talk about they'll talk about stories of, oh, you never knew we did this. And sometimes like, I totally knew we were doing that,
Yes.
But there's some things that's like shocking. Back in the 80s growing up, it's like, there's so much that mom and dad will never know because it was a lot easier then, right?
Yeah.
And stuff. But, honestly, I think it's kind of important for kids to have that, They're doing something stupid, but it's not going to,
Be the end
damn
of the
their
world.
soul for
Yeah,
eternity.
exactly.
They're not going to, run away with some person on the back of a motorcycle and live under a bridge in LA. It's not going to be like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I hadn't even thought of that one.
Uh-oh, new fear unlocked.
New fear.
Yeah.
What about on a more practical level? Just like taking emotion out of it, just total practicality. A lot of parents my age are having that whole discussion on what is financially beneficial to their children by how much should they, help support or help financially. And that's a legit conversation. I'm one to want to help as much as possible, but there is that idea of, oh well, someone brought up to me recently, well, if your child's living at home with you without paying any rent or anything, they're not building up their, credit or their, can't have a referral when they want to go get a place. I feel like that's, whatever. But it did bring up a question of, how much is enabling and how much is supporting? And like, just your take on it?
That's the rub, right? Yes. And so, and my wife and I have had that conversation before,
Most
but our
parents have.
default position, of course, is we want to help.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to help, and we've been in, in various parts of life, we've been in a position to help, and other positions where it's like, well, we want to help, but it's hard to help, But that's the question. Am I enabling here, or am I genuinely helping?
Yeah.
And I guess if I made a mistake, I would rather make a mistake on helping, But I don't know. I think you just get this sense of. I think you just. I don't know. I've just felt like, well, you just know. And I know that's not a good answer, and it's probably not very helpful, but I know my kids, I know them well, and there's certain things that's like, yeah, they could really use this, None of them, I'm trying to remember if there was ever a time when anybody's just come out and just asked for money, for help in that way. And I'm having trouble remembering if they've ever done that. But there's been times when we've, just done it, And so for just a short-term thing, they'll say, I'll pay you back whenever this is, here and stuff. And it's like, we're not worried about that. Don't, it's fine. You don't have to, and stuff. But sometimes still they'll want to, and they will. But it's like, you don't. But I guess if it's something, if it's to buy a video game, then it's like, no, sorry, I'm not going to do that, But if it's, man, I'm stuck right now, and I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna get through. These are the conversations that we've had. So I don't relate just necessarily with the one who's perpetually, I can't pay rent or something like that. I just can't relate with that. But I've been in those conversations where it's, I'm just stuck right now, and I need a bridge just to make it over that. And so we're like, well, sure, and then they'll want to pay us back, and sometimes they have. Even still, though, it's like we don't want you to pay us back. That's not for that. But sometimes for their own sake, they wanted to. But whether they do or not, it's well, of course we want to help you and stuff. So I don't think it's wrong to help people. I don't think it's wrong to help our kids. You know, I want them to help us one day. My youngest is like, I'm already looking at, retirement home brochures, but hopefully she's just joking. You never can tell with her, but I just don't think it's wrong to help. I know this is kind of a long way of getting there, but I think if it's like, honestly, I'm just enabling them to kind of either not work or just be lazy. I think you'll know that.
Mm-hmm.
I
think that's it. I think, bringing everything to the Lord in prayer and listening to the Holy Spirit's leading. And also,
Yeah,
like you
for
said
sure.
earlier, every single child is different. I'm telling you, some children, they cannot wait to leave the home, and others you're like, might need a little kick in the butt,
Sure.
So you'll know with the personality what your choice might bring.
Yeah.
So I do think it's, that's why it's interesting to have that conversation, because I think
Yeah.
other parents need to hear, there is no cut and dry answer.
Right.
There really isn't.
Yeah.
No.
And these are new questions and conversations we have to have in
Right.
light of the way the, market is
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
But I think it's also letting go of that mentality of like when I was a kid, my dad, he was in the Vietnam War at 18. So his way he was parented was very different. And he did look at us as like, well, once you're 18, you're out, and I think no shame on him. It's just the way they parented then was for the idea of independence. They were
Yeah.
shooting for training you to be independent. And I've learned over time that we really want to be moving towards interdependence. Because that's why we don't have tribes anymore, or connections or that community and we want the family community. And it's because we've been, parenting to independence, and we really want interdependence. So it's
Right.
what you were just saying,
Yeah.
where you're like, I want to help them because I want them to help me someday. We want that, connection. And,
Right.
it's that, we all need each other kind
Yeah.
of thing.
It's back to that relationship piece that we just keep
Yes.
talking about. And like we've talked about, each kid has its own need. Each situation has its own,
Yeah.
guidelines that it might need. And I think it's just relationship is so important. Speaking of relationships, as our kids get older, we bring new relationships in. They get married
Yes.
and date,
Yeah.
and there's in-laws.
Right.
So, you work really hard to have this relationship with your kids, and then they bring someone else in. I just want to talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you build relationship with that person? And then how do you create an atmosphere where they're choosing, because at that point you bring someone else in, they have another family,
Yes.
and you want your child to choose when they can to be with you. So
Right.
are there some things that you guys do or hope
sure.
for to aim for that?
Yeah. Well, let me start off by saying, we feel so blessed and relieved. Our oldest, she dated some guys, and I'm like, oh Lord, but. But she didn't date a lot of guys, but a couple of them were just like, oh my gosh. But no, like our son-in-law Andrew is amazing. Love that guy. And my thing. So you watched Meet the Parents, Ben Stiller,
Yep.
the whole circle of trust thing.
Yeah.
I was shocked. That is so real. That is so real. The circle of trust, And when I first watched it, just kids were little, and it was just funny. Now it's like I get that totally,
level.
And so Andrew's coming in, and I don't know, in my dad protector, thing that I have, the first perception is invader, and it's like, why am I feeling? So I'm realizing this stuff, and it's like, it's gonna happen, and it's like invader, and it's just it's another piece of parenting where you just open yourself. Parenting is a series of heartbreaks, isn't it? Oh my
for real.
gosh. But, and one of the biggest heartbreaks, but yet one of the most amazing things at the same it's when she got married, when my oldest gets married, it's one of the highlight days of my life is one of the biggest days of her life as well. The day she gets married. It's also this big heartbreaking day, But he comes in, and there's this, there's just this opening up, we're gonna open up this circle of trust and just invite him in. And for me, it's this decision. I'm gonna love him like I love my own sons. Last night as they were leaving, I just gave him a big hug. Love you, Andrew. And so it's, and I do. I love him just like I love my own sons, Dayton and Landon. So it's just, it's that piece there. And parenting them, realizing that they're building their own lives now, and now there's in-laws and things. And so we're blessed. He comes from a just a family that's a lot like ours, I think, and just they love each other. He comes from a much larger family. We have 4 kids. He's one of 7.
Oh,
and so, anytime there's a family that large, there's a certain dynamic that's just going to be cool, right? So, but anyways, so like for us, like with holidays, is a big deal.
Yeah.
How do you share holidays? Because
That
we
is
want
the
every Christmas.
question. That is
Yeah.
the question. Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, Vicki and I, we had this conversation, and honestly, it was one of those type of decisions, but real. It's like we can't. They live here.
Yeah.
We're so grateful, and so if they go to Chicago, for Christmas, every Christmas, then okay, we understand, because we get to see you all the time. They're great people. They never get to see you, except for FaceTime. And so it's like, man, are we just going to be selfish with those days? Because, when it comes down to it, it's like we can celebrate Christmas a week early or a week later or something like that. But, they've decided to come to a thing of every other year. And so we're like, yes. But we had that conversation with them that, man, we get to see you all the time. So, we understand, we don't want to be selfish.
Yeah.
That's like when our kids went, the 3, they, reached college age. 2 went to college, 1 didn't. And it was, where are you going to go to church? And so sometimes there's we're just going to stay with us, and stuff. But we had the conversation, if you were going away, because they all stayed local. If you were going to go away, though, you would build a life. You would find a place to go to church. And so we want you to, from us at least, feel like that you might already be looking, but we want you to have that freedom. We would love for you to stay with us at church, but understanding that, you're building your life, find your own way and stuff, and they each have and stuff. And when it comes to marriage, it's the same kind of concept.
Yeah.
We want you to, be with us all the time, but at the same time, you're building your life.
So what I'm hearing is that you're just being preemptive in those conversations too, in not just letting things happen.
Oh, yeah.
And,
we're not
and
being
then
reactive.
Yes.
Well, as much as we can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yes.
I guess we have been. I've not ever used that word, but looking back, it's like, I guess we have been.
And I appreciate that you're not like giving permission, but more you're giving. I hate to even say blessing because it gives too much of authority, but more you're giving empathy and understanding, and so that almost builds the desire for them to want to continue to be in relationship with you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like, giving a little, you get a lot back.
I think blessing, honestly, is a good word for it, even with adult kids, because you're still their parents. The role changes, but there still is an aspect of, you are my parents, even if I don't, you're not the authority in all these decisions of my life. You're still somebody of supreme significance because you're mom and dad, And so I think even using the word blessing is a good, freedom, blessing, whatever you want to call it.
You have our support,
Right.
Yeah.
And so when it came to holidays and stuff like that, we had that conversation first with them, I guess. So I think that everything just kind of boils down to being able to have a conversation, which unfortunately can be really hard for a lot of people for some reason.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of reasons, I guess.
Well, I think too, I think it's hard because we're asking each other to be authentic. And I think being authentic and saying, I'm sorry, those are not easy things unless you practice them.
Right.
I can remember the first time I said sorry to my littles. It was like ripping it out of me. And I was glad they were young because it was just like, I'm sorry.
But that was so huge for them.
Yeah.
Just even if they didn't perceive it at the time because they were little, just they learn something about you
Yeah.
that mom's cool in this way. Mom's real.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that's just a perception they have of you as you move forward. And I don't think it's ever too late for this. Never too late for this. Even if kids are already adults, just to own something. I can go back and just recount my regrets. You know, a lot of them. I can spend quite a bit of time. And a matter of fact, one night we were doing that, and it was Dayton, our second born, oldest boy. He's like, Dad. He stopped me. He's like, Dad, when I look back at my childhood, that's not what I remember. And I'm like, which is unreal to me, because I'm like, how could you not? How can that not be
That was
the
a
big
big
thing
whoops.
that you only see every time you look back at your childhood, you know, and stuff. But he's like, Dad, honestly, he's like, that's not what I remember when I think back at my child. This was months ago. He said this. He's like, I remember good things. And so, which honestly, yes, again, is mind-blowing to me,
Yeah, it's
because
just God's
I look
mercy
back
and
at
grace.
the mistakes,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could sit here and chat forever.
I know. We can keep on going.
Oh, man.
But thank
Yeah.
you so much
Well, I hope
for
it's been
being
useful,
here.
been helpful.
It has. We love to just wrap every podcast up with one last question. If you could leave our listeners with one last thought or something you didn't get to talk about today, what would that be?
What would that be? Well, something kind of a personal mission that I have. I get up in the morning. Part of my prayer time is, you know, I want to be light and life and healing to the world around me, you know? So Lord, open up those doors. Help me just to have my head on a swivel so I can see those opportunities. And honestly, if there's one place that I want to do that the most, it's home. And so with every interaction, I have an opportunity. I have a decision to make. You know, I can bring heaven or I can bring hell. And that's literally my decisions right there. I can bring the kingdom of God into this situation and bring life and light and healing, whether it's just a normal interaction or a tough situation, or I can literally bring hell, right? And so if I come from a standpoint of, even if there's things to address, but if I come from a standpoint of, above anybody else on this planet, these are the people that I want to bring the most life, light, and as parents, man, that we get that privilege. It's on us to be able and have the privilege of doing that, right? And so I think with every interaction, if we can just think, man, I am that place, you know, as a believer. Because I'm a believer, I am that place where heaven and earth converge. and I want to bring the kingdom of God into my home, into this conversation, whether it's good or tough. I think if we have that mindset, you know, we're not going to do it right all the time, but God redeems, you know, and if we're open with one another, we have that ability to even do that, have that redemptive quality with one another.
Awesome.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
Paul. I'm so glad you just came and brought your authenticity here.
Yes. Well, let me just close us in prayer.
Thanks.
Heavenly Father, we are just so honored and grateful that you have made us parents to the children that we have, and just the children around us. And I pray that you would give us great wisdom as we build relationship with them, as we walk through life with them. I pray that you would help us to be a light with them. Help us to bring your love into every situation. In your precious name, amen.
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 This podcast is hosted by me, Stacy Ludwig, and Jackie Carlson. We are mixed and edited by Andrew Leopard. Our senior producer is Colin McFarland. Anchors and Waves is a part of the Mission Hills Podcast Network. Thank you for listening.